You know that immense satisfaction of watching like a perfectly set up Rube Goldberg machine?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's mesmerizing.
Right. You flick that first domino and then, that hits a marble. The marble rolls down a ramp.
And the ramp triggers a catapult, yeah.
Exactly. It's this beautiful physical chain reaction. Once that very first domino falls, well, the end result is just absolutely guaranteed.
Right, it's the comfort of unbroken causality. I mean, you're watching a system where A leads to B, which inevitably leads to C. Every action is completely determined by the action that preceded it, kind of writing a script that just cannot be changed.
But what if right in the middle of that perfectly engineered setup, the marble just, stopped?
Or the domino fell backward.
Yeah. Or the catapult launched sideways for literally no physical reason at all. Today, we're tearing up the rulebook of cause and effect. We're exploring the science of indeterminism to find out if the universe is a predictable machine, or if pure, unadulterated chance is the only thing giving us free will. Okay, let's unpack this because today's stack of notes comes from a massive deep dive into the concept of indeterminism.
Which is quite the rabbit hole.
It really is. So where do we even begin to dismantle the idea that everything happens for a strict, unbreakable reason?
Well, we basically have to start by rethinking our everyday assumptions about how causes actually work. Because most of us walk around assuming that if an event happens, there was a singular definitive cause that forced it to happen.
Right, like cause and effect. Simple.
Exactly. But philosophers and scientists, they break causality down further. The most crucial distinction we need to make here is between what we call necessary and sufficient causes.
Necessary versus sufficient. Okay, this is one of those logic puzzle concepts, but once it clicks, it kind of changes how you view the world. I always think of oxygen in a campfire.
That's a great example.
Right, because oxygen is a necessary cause. You absolutely cannot have a fire without it. But just because there's oxygen in the air around you right now, your living room isn't spontaneously combusting.
Exactly. And hopefully it stays that way.
Yeah.
That distinction is vital. Oxygen is necessary, but it's not sufficient on its own to guarantee a fire. Now, contrast that with a sufficient cause. If X is a sufficient cause of Y, it means if X happens, Y is definitely going to happen.
Got it.
So indeterminists don't actually deny that causes exist. They just argue that the universe might only be driven by necessary causes rather than sufficient ones. The past sets the stage, but it doesn't automatically write the final script.
Okay, and I guess that leads into this idea of probabilistic causation, right? Like, we know from the source material that war doesn't always cause mass casualties.
Like with modern cyber warfare.
Exactly. Or, a singular moment of smoking a cigarette doesn't automatically cause cancer. It just increases the probability. But, okay, wait, I have to push back here. When we say smoking probabilistically causes cancer, isn't that just a fancy way of saying our science isn't precise enough yet to predict exactly who gets it?
Ah, that is the big question.
Like, if we knew every single genetic marker, every cellular state, every environmental factor of a person, wouldn't we know with 100% certainty who gets sick? Is the universe actually random, or are we just really bad at measuring it?
You're hitting on the exact divide between unpredictability and intrinsic indeterminism.
Okay, break that down for me.
So unpredictability is just what you described. It's an epistemic limitation, basically a limitation of our own knowledge and measuring tools. It's the idea that the universe is still a perfect machine. We just can't see all the gears. But intrinsic indeterminism claims the universe fundamentally has random elements into its very fabric. Even with a God's eye view, even with infinite knowledge of every variable, you still couldn't perfectly predict the outcome.
Oh, wow. So it's baked into the source code of reality.
Exactly. And Karl Popper had a brilliant way of framing this. He divided the world into clouds and clocks.
Clouds and clocks. I like that.
Yeah, so clocks are deterministic systems. Think of pendulums or the solar system things that are highly orderly and predictable.
Right. Tick-tock, very mechanical.
Exactly. And clouds are indeterministic systems. Think of a swarm of gnats or weather patterns, highly irregular, shifting, and unpredictable.
So the classic worldview, the Newtonian physics view, is that the universe is a giant clock.
Yes, but Popper sided with the American philosopher Charles Sanders Peirce, who argued that actually all clocks are clouds to some degree.
Wait, really? All clocks are clouds?
Yeah. Even the most precise atomic clock in the world is made of vibrating atoms that have a tiny degree of physical wiggle room. Complete perfection and pure determinism are essentially illusions.
That is wild. I love that phrase, all clocks are clouds. And what's wild is that worrying about whether we live in a cloud or a clock isn't some modern anxiety born out of advanced physics. I mean, humans have been wrestling with this for thousands of years.
Oh, definitely. If we look back to ancient Greek philosophy, we see them grappling with this exact tension. Leucippus, an ancient atomist, was actually one of the first to describe the cosmos as being made of atoms submitted to a casual and unpredictable movement.
Visualizing random atomic movement way back then is just a massive leap of imagination.
It really is. And then Aristotle introduced the concept of touche, or chance. He basically said there are plenty of things that happen that have a traceable material cause. But sometimes things just happen by accident. They fall completely outside of standard natural explanations.
So he just refused to buy into the idea that absolutely every event has a singular, inevitable origin.
Exactly. But the most fleshed out ancient version of this comes from Epicurus and his concept of the Klinemen, or the swerve.
The swerve. This is my favorite part of the note.
It's so good. Epicureans believed the universe was just a bunch of atoms falling through a void. But they argue that every once in a while, completely at random, an atom would just swerve from its determined path.
Just bump into something else.
Right. It bumps into another atom, initiating an entirely new, unpredicted chain of events.
It's totally like a glitch in a video game's physics engine. You know, you have this massive simulation running with perfect rules, but every now and then a pixel deviates, a character clips through a wall, and Epicurus was basically saying that tiny glitch, that physical loophole, is the exact space where human free will lives.
Yes.
Because without the glitch, we are just pre-programmed non-player characters.
Exactly. And what's fascinating here is why he insisted on this swerve. It wasn't just a physics theory for him. It was a moral necessity.
How?
Well, he realized that if the universe was strictly determined, like if every falling atom was on a fixed path since the dawn of time, then human beings are just biological machines on a track. And if we're on a track, we can't have moral responsibility for our actions.
Right, because you didn't choose to do it. The atoms did.
Exactly. Epicurus felt so strongly about this that he explicitly wrote, "It would be better to believe in the old myths of meddling arbitrary gods who mess with our lives, rather than believing in the strict determinism of natural philosophers."
Because you can at least try to appease a chaotic god. You can't negotiate with a mathematical equation.
Precisely.
The anxiety of having no control over your fate was so intense they'd rather have chaotic gods running the show. But I mean, the ancients were just guessing at the swerve as a philosophical workaround. It actually took until the 20th century for science to prove that the universe really is fundamentally jittery.
Yes. We are talking about the birth of quantum mechanics, specifically the Copenhagen interpretation. This was the earthquake that shattered the deterministic worldview of classical physics.
Because classical physics, like Isaac Newton's laws, was basically a perfectly choreographed train schedule. If you knew the position and momentum of every train on the tracks, you could calculate where everything would be 100 years from now. And where everything was 100 years ago, it was the ultimate clock.
Right. But then scientists started looking at the subatomic level, and they found that the most basic constituents of matter, they don't behave like tiny trains on tracks.
Right.
They behave according to probabilities. This is where we run into the wave function. When a particle isn't being measured, it doesn't have a specific location. It exists as a smeared-out wave of potential locations and states.
It's everywhere and nowhere at the same time until you look at it.
Exactly. And when you finally measure it, that wave function collapses into a definite state. The particle suddenly picks a location. But the crucial part is, you cannot predict exactly where it will land.
You can only guess.
Well, you can only predict the odds of where it might land using a mathematical formula called the Born rule.
So the universe is basically rolling dice. And famously, Albert Einstein hated this.
He really did.
He literally said, God does not play dice with the universe. He just refused to believe that reality was fundamentally based on chance. So he tried to save determinism by proposing hidden variables.
Right. Einstein argued that the quantum world only looks random to us because we are missing information. If two particles interact and become entangled, their states are linked. If you measure one, it instantly dictates the state of the other, even if they are light years apart.
Which is spooky action at a distance.
Exactly. Einstein thought they must have had a secret, prearranged blueprint, a hidden variable that told them how to behave before they separated.
He thought we just couldn't read the blueprint yet. But he was wrong, right? I know we eventually tested this in the 80s with Elaine Aspect, building on physicist John S. Bell's work. How did they actually prove there was no secret blueprint?
Okay, so Bell formulated an ingenious mathematical theorem. He proved that if these particles were carrying a hidden blueprint, there was a strict statistical limit to how often their measurements could correlate when we test them at different angles.
Okay, so there's a hard mathematical cap on how in sync they could be.
Exactly. And Elaine Aspect ran the experiments, and the particles violated that limit. They correlated more often than any pre-written script would mathematically allow.
Which means they aren't following a script at all. They are deciding their state at the exact moment of measurement. The indeterminism is real, and the outcome of a quantum measurement is genuinely, intrinsically not determined until it happens.
It's pure chance. And this breakdown of the clock isn't just happening at the microscopic quantum level either.
Wait, really? Where else?
Well, a physicist and chemist named Ilya Prigogine argued that determinism falls apart at the macroscopic level when you look at complex, unstable systems.
But how does that work? I mean, if I throw a baseball, I can calculate its arc pretty predictably.
You can, because a baseball in a vacuum is a simple closed system. But Prigogine looked at thermodynamics, specifically systems operating far from equilibrium.
Okay, like what?
Think of a hurricane or solar radiation or a living biological cell. These systems are constantly exchanging huge amounts of energy and matter with their environment. They are inherently unstable and highly sensitive to the tiniest fluctuations.
Oh, like the butterfly effect. A butterfly flaps its wings in Brazil and sets off a tornado in Texas.
Yes. And Prigogine's profound insight was about the arrow of time. Classical deterministic physics equations are time reversible. Mathematically, they work exactly the same forwards and backwards.
Right.
If the universe is perfectly deterministic, there is no fundamental difference between the past and the future.
Which totally contradicts our actual lived experience of time moving in one direction.
Exactly. Determinism denies the arrow of time. But Prigogine pointed out that in far from equilibrium systems, processes are irreversible. You cannot unbake a cake, and you cannot unmix a drop of ink in a glass of water.
Right, it's a one-way street.
Because these chaotic systems amplify tiny, random fluctuations, their future states cannot be calculated from their past states. They require an open future. Without irreversibility and indeterminism, time itself doesn't really have a direction.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting and honestly a little frustrating. Because if indeterminism just means that at a quantum level, particles are randomly collapsing, and at a macro level, chaotic systems are just statistically unpredictable, how does that actually help us?
What do you mean?
Well, if my choices are just the result of a quantum dice roll happening in my brain, that doesn't sound like free will to me. That just sounds like chaos. Being a slave to a random number generator is just as bad as being a slave to a deterministic clock.
Ah, yes. Philosophers of science recognized this exact problem early on. Randomness alone is not control. In 1931, the physicist Arthur Hawley Compton actually tried to tackle this dilemma.
Okay, what did he suggest?
He knew we needed the randomness of quantum mechanics to break the chains of determinism, but we needed something else to actually steer the ship.
Right, so if it's not just a coin flip in my head, what's the actual mechanism?
So Compton proposed a two-stage model. He argued that first, the physical conditions of the universe, including the complex thermodynamic state of your brain, generate a range of random, undetermined possible events or thoughts.
Okay, so stage one is the generation of possibilities, just the quantum and biological noise.
Exactly. But then comes stage two, which is the act of choice. Compton argued that you exercise freedom by adding a determining factor that isn't supplied by the physical conditions alone. Your conscious intent acts as a filter. You survey the randomly generated options, and you select one, thereby determining what actually occurs.
So the universe serves up a menu of chaotic options, and my consciousness acts as the filter that decides what actually gets ordered.
That's a great way to put it.
That brings us from the cosmic level directly into our own heads, because if we are talking about choices and brain states, we have to talk about how this physically plays out in human psychology.
We do. And Robert Cain, a major contemporary philosopher on free will, has a concept called self-forming actions, or SFAs, which grounds this whole debate beautifully.
SFAs.
Yeah. Cain argues that having alternative possibilities is necessary for free will, but is not sufficient. Remember our necessary versus sufficient distinction with the oxygen in the fire.
Right. Alternative possibilities are the oxygen. You need the undetermined options. But the fire, the actual control, comes from what Cain calls ultimate responsibility.
Exactly. And this responsibility is forged during these self-forming actions.
Yeah.
An SFA is a moment of deep, agonizing indecision where you have conflicting wills.
Like a moral dilemma.
Right. Imagine you're walking to an important meeting and you see someone drop their wallet.
Right.
Part of your character, your moral upbringing, wants to stop and help. Another part of your character, your ambition, knows you were late and wants to just keep walking.
So my brain is essentially in a neurological tug of war. How does Keynes' theory resolve that without it just being a random coin flip?
Well, in that moment, you have competing neural pathways firing at the exact same time. Your brain is in a genuinely undetermined state. The outcome is not predetermined by your past habits. Whichever choice you make it by an effort of will that overcomes the indeterministic noise of the opposing choice.
Oh, wow.
And by making that choice, you lay down new neural pathways. You literally form your own character, making yourself slightly more likely to be a helpful person or a selfish person in the future.
So what does this all mean? It's like the character creation screen in a role-playing game.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, you start the game and you are distributing points into different stats. Charisma, strength, empathy. You might live 90% of your life on autopilot, acting out of habit. But those rare, agonizing moments of genuine moral conflict, those SFAs, are the moments you are pulled back to the character creation screen. You are rolling the dice, sure, but you are also actively coding your own character's future tendencies. You are building the person who will go on to make future choices.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it perfectly synthesizes our entire deep dive today. We need Epicurus's swerve. We need the quantum jitters and the thermodynamic chaos to give us a future that isn't already written. But we also need our own ultimate responsibility, our self-forming actions, to steer that swerve.
And neuroscientists are actually finding evidence for this kind of biological indeterminism, aren't they? I'm looking at the notes on Bjorn Brems and Christoph Koch. They found stochastic processes built in randomness even in the brains of simple organisms like flies. But I mean, how do you even measure free will in a fly?
It's such a brilliant experiment. Brems and his team took fruit flies and tethered them inside a tiny, completely featureless white cylinder. There was no sensory input, no changing light, no wind, no visual cues whatsoever.
So if a fly is just a deterministic biological clock, an input-output machine, a lack of input should mean a lack of output. It should just fly straight or do nothing.
Exactly the premise.
Yeah.
But that's not what happened. The flies didn't just fly straight. They continuously initiated complex, spontaneous evasive maneuvers. They darted left, darted right.
Even with no stimulus.
Even with no stimulus. The researchers analyzed the flight patterns and found they weren't just simple random noise like radiostatic. They matched a mathematical pattern called a Levy flight, which is an optimized search strategy. The fly's brain was spontaneously generating its own behavioral noise independently of the environment.
So the fly is generating its own options. Now, I assume a fly darting left in a white tube isn't experiencing a deep moral dilemma.
No. Brems is quick to point out that a fly's unpredictable buzzing is not the same thing as human moral responsibility. It's not a complex ethical framework. But it is a biological prerequisite. It proves that biological brains evolved to be probabilistic, not strictly deterministic.
Wow.
Evolution actually favored the cloud over the clock because being slightly unpredictable is a massive survival advantage against predators.
Yeah.
If a predator can perfectly calculate your next move, well, you get eaten.
It's incredible to think about. We've journeyed all the way from the basic logic of cause and effect, learning that just because something is necessary doesn't mean it's sufficient to force an outcome. We watched the ancient Greeks invent the atomic swerve just to save humanity from feeling like pre-programmed robots.
We really covered some ground.
Yeah, we explored how Bell's theorem proved Einstein wrong, showing that the universe really does play dice with entangled particles. We saw how complex, far from equilibrium systems give time its one-way arrow. And finally, we looked inside the jittery, spontaneous brains of flies to understand how our own moments of deep indecision allow us to literally wire our own character.
It's a massive philosophical and scientific landscape, but the overarching theme is so empowering. The universe is far less like a ticking, rigid clock and much more like a shifting, dynamic cloud.
It really makes you look at your own choices differently.
It really does. And to leave you with one final mind-bending thought, there is a theory by the physicist David Bohm.
Oh, I've heard of him.
Yeah, Bohm looked at all this, the quantum randomness and the macroscopic determinism, and he speculated something brilliant. He noted that strict, predictable determinism can actually emerge from underlying chaos, thanks to the law of large numbers. But equally true, Pure indeterminism and chaos can emerge from perfectly deterministic systems, like we see in classical chaos theory.
Wait, so it's not a strict binary, like it's not just one or the other.
Right. Bohm speculated that the universe might not be fundamentally just a clock or just a cloud. Instead, reality might consist of infinite alternating layers of causality and chaos, a layer of strict rules resting on a layer of randomness, resting on another layer of rules, going all the way down forever.
That is heavy, and it perfectly frames the question I want to leave you, the listener, with today. The next time you find yourself making a surprisingly spontaneous choice, whether it's taking a different route to work, or finally speaking your mind in a meeting, or even just picking up a dropped wallet, ask yourself, in that exact moment, which layer of the universe are you operating in? Are you just the marble rolling down the predetermined ramp of the Rube Goldberg machine? Or are you the sudden, inexplicable glitch that changes the machine forever?